Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction and for explaining Adobe Connect. Hey, everyone. We're all excited to be here presenting this webinar from South Florida. I'm Emily Cleary. I'm a former educator, and I'm currently the content and marketing manager for MYSIMPLESHOW. To my left, we have Mario Lacerda. He is a project manager for SimpleShow. And to my right, we have Rod Diaz, and he is the creative director for SimpleShow. And we are looking forward to getting this started. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So at the end of today's webinar, you'll understand how to write a captivating script that gets your message across, how to effectively visualize so learners understand the content that you're presenting, and how to efficiently use MySimpleShow to create engaging do-it-yourself videos for educational purposes. You'll also learn some general tips and tricks on the basics of creating a MySimpleShow explainer video. And in order to write a great script, which then turns into the voiceover of your video, understand and learn everything that I'll be talking about today, I'll first discuss the power of simplicity and explanation and why video is one of the most efficient ways to communicate. But before I go into that, I just want to say, give a quick shout out to everyone in the webinar. I see we have some people from the States and Oklahoma, and we have an attendant from South Korea. Thank you so much for joining. We're so happy to have you. I actually want to start with a short video that I made with our tool just to show you exactly what you can do with it. So let me go ahead. A brief introduction to the Dewey Decimal Classification System. A brief introduction to the Dewey Decimal Classification System. The Dewey Decimal Classification System introduced the concepts of relative location and relative index. These concepts allow new books to be added to a library in their appropriate location based on subject. The system uses Arabic numerals and fractional decimals to classify books. For a more detailed explanation on how to use the Dewey Decimal Classification System, contact your local librarian. So that's just a short video showing what exactly we can do, and we'll get more into the tips and tricks later on. But first, we're going to start with script writing and how to give an effective explanation. So I'll start by explaining the power of simplicity, and there are three things that contribute to this. So they include: 1, why is simple explanation so important? 2, how do our brains work? And then, we need to know that to explain something simply. And 3, we'll then go into the 5 rules of simple explanation. So number 1, why is simple explanation so important? Well, firstly, we live in an age of data and information, right? Information is coming at us from all angles, and we're constantly learning. Whether we're inside a library, a classroom, an administration office, or any other place, really. Due to these technological advancements, the units in which we communicate are generally getting shorter. For example, we can do much more in less amount of time now. We used to spend some hours just writing letters to send them off and then wait a few more days for communication from the receiver, just to speak with somebody. But now we can just send an email of the same length in about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less. So it's possible for us to send around 10 of these emails per hour or even more, depending on how you type, really. So another example is people used to spend much more time searching for works in the library some decades ago, but now there's online search databases available for use. And because we're now highly connected, which is mostly a great thing, we tend to get distracted too. And this is maybe one of the downfalls of being so highly connected. Actually, based on a Microsoft study, our attention spans have gone from about 12 seconds to about 8 or 9 seconds, which is similar to the attention span of a goldfish, until we can start focusing on something else. So there's our case in point right there, right? We need to be able to give simple, entertaining explanations and attractively, convey information in a short amount of time. And that's where simple explanation through video comes in. So the next point, explanation versus description. So this is the why and the how versus the what. Before getting into video specifics for research and education, we must establish how to give a great explanation. Sometimes experts are not automatically good at explaining because they have such a high level of knowledge on a topic, and that's perfectly fine and quite understandable. You'll find this when doing academic research about almost any topic, and in my personal experience, many learners tend to just read the abstract of academic papers instead of all of the research provided, because sometimes there's just too much information. It's like an information overload. It might not be easily understandable because it's coming from an expert's point of view. And it's hard to remember because of that. So to make messages stay in mind, it's all about the why, which is explaining, and less about the how, which is describing. Luckily, explaining is quite the learnable skill. So I want to give you an example here. Let's take the safety pin experiment. So you see the safety pin on the screen, right? You're given this safety pin. Explain the safety pin to someone. Describe it so they can guess what the object is without seeing it. Many times people will start describing it. It's metal, it's 4 to 5 centimeters long, it's rounded or bent at the ends, and maybe straight on the edges. But many people won't be able to understand what exactly you're talking about. But if you tell a story and explain how it's used, people will definitely understand more quickly. So I'll go with a personal anecdote. A few weeks ago, I was running late to work, and the bottom button on my dress shirt fell off because the thread came loose. That's what I get for shopping the sale rack. In a hurry and with no other clean shirt, I used this to quickly attach both sides of the shirt together, tuck it into my pants, and run out the door and be on my way. And I pricked my finger slightly during the process too. So it's much easier to guess what I'm talking about. Oh, she's talking about a safety pin, once you give the context of a story. So number 2, how do our human brains work? What happens in the brain when we take in information? Text is a sequence of small images. You see on the presentation here, a circle above a vertical bar with serifs, arrow pointing right, silhouette of a head looking left. So every letter is actually a little symbol, a little picture. Those little pictures form words and sentences, and when we read them, we decode them in our heads and make meanings, and then we can understand exactly what it is that we're reading, and we can process the information. And finally, number 3, the 5 rules of video explanation. And I'm going to hand this over to my colleague Rod, and he's going to take over for you and explain it.
Thanks, Emily. Hey, everyone. So yeah, as Emily said before, I'm Rod Diaz. I'm the creative director here at SimpleShow. And, we know a lot about the 5 rules of explanation. As a matter of fact, we go through them before we onboard anybody, any of our concept writers, any of our explanation experts. This is something that we have to teach to each one of them. So it's something that I think can be very useful for you guys. So, teaching is explaining, and learning from educators or from research is understanding a topic at a deeper level. Video provides a medium to do both and cater the information to the lesson or topic being taught. The 5 rules of explanation will further describe how videos use text, images, and storytelling to bring your message across. So first, rule number 1, change your perspective. Always put your audience first. This is something that couldn't be more important when we actually tune into what the message is. We always want to focus on who our audience is. This couldn't be more important. This can be in everything from when you're just explaining something to a friend or a colleague, or a large audience. Who is the widest audience? That's what you want to know. So you might be an expert in the subject you're explaining, but the learners are most likely not. You need to know exactly where they are coming from, perspective-wise, what prior knowledge they have, and how to get them interested in the topic you are teaching about. Keep these simple questions in mind while writing your story. Put yourself in the viewer's chair. In what situation do your students receive your explanation? In what context do they understand it? What are the learner's pains, needs, or interests? What motivates them? What prior knowledge do they have? That's really important. What is obvious to you but not your listener? What can you leave out and discuss later, and what information is essential? That couldn't be more important. I mean, we're constantly having situations where people want us to make a video for them, and they think everything is important. Why? Because they're so close to the content. So sometimes you have to kind of step back and say, hey, if this is the first time I'm getting this message, what's going to be the most useful to me? And maybe I don't need to explain everything just yet. Maybe I can just start, give them an introduction of the message and then get into the details later in our second conversation or our second presentation or in the second meeting. So rule number 2, simplify your message. This is easier said than done, especially for experts and seasoned educators with such wide knowledge base that sometimes they err on the side of thinking everything is important. But sometimes less is better. When this happens, more and more information is packed into the explanation and can overwhelm learners in the process. Cut out the clutter from your explanation and don't water down the core of the message. Some tips for you. So just real quick, going back to that point about not watering down, that's something that we always try to say here, and it's a big phrase that we tell everyone, which is, as complex as necessary, but as simple as possible. That's really one of our go-to catchphrases around here. So, and a lot of people get a little bit worried. They hear my simple show. I don't want to water down my message. I don't want to oversimplify it. Well, you always have to, have that in mind, and that's something that we really live by. So you really need to make it as complex as necessary, but as simple as possible, and really focus on that simple as possible part. So don't repeat yourself. Say things once. Say them very clearly. Those are some kind of key points that we try to focus on over here. You want to make your audience understand the big picture first. You can add details afterwards, much easier and much more effectively. Emphasize the why connections before you describe the how. Go step by step using cause and effect to get from the why to the how. This goes back to the explanation versus description bit that Emily was telling you earlier. So another really good point is to use simple language. Avoid jargon and words that may not be familiar to everyone. We work constantly here with the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason they love us so much is because we get away from that pharma lingo and from the excessive use of acronyms, and suddenly, someone from one department might not know what someone from a different department his acronym is, so they forget that when they're explaining the message. So that's why they come to us. Keep that in mind if you guys are doing your own videos. Put yourself in the shoes of everyone else. Stay away from acronyms or overly descriptive words or words that are very specific to you. You want words that everyone can understand. Rule number 3, tell a story. Humans love telling stories. They are pleasant for us in regards to providing or receiving explanations because stories entertain and educate. They include emotion, characters, and the message we want to get across. So the power of storytelling is a great way to hook learners and get them focused on your message. When telling a story, always keep in mind the starting point, the audience's perspective of what they already know. Create a character and scenarios to make the story relatable and realistic, reminding the learner of a situation that is familiar to them. Also, make sure to use a dramatic arc. What we do a lot, is we always try to say, hey, who's our audience? Let's try to make our main character who our audience is, so that they can relate to it. So, if our audience are librarians, we want the main character of our video to also be a librarian, so you guys can relate to it, right? So the dramatic arc is really important. Also, we want to start here. As you can see, here's an image of the dramatic arc. There's many different interpretations of the dramatic arc, but they're all very similar to this. They work with blockbuster pictures, and they also work with children's books. So there's always a general dramatic arc that a storyteller and an explanation expert really knows well. And sometimes if you don't really study this arc, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but if you don't study this arc and have it somewhat based on this, you'll lose your audience really fast. People will disengage, whether it's a lecture, whether it's a video, whether it's a presentation or even a meeting or a pitch or anything that you're trying to achieve. So first, let's start with number 1, topic introduction, as you can see there on the chart. Start with a short introduction stating what the video will be explaining. For example, an introduction to the Dewey Decimal System, as the video that Emily showed you earlier. Starting with an introduction sentence, the viewer knows what to expect. Usually 1 sentence is plenty. I also like to tell people this gives the audience a chance to kind of settle into the topic. So people aren't automatically with their paying attention brains on, right? So sometimes it takes them a couple seconds to really settled into watching it. So especially if you're making a video, it's nice to have this intro slide that says something very simple that doesn't require too much thinking, because they're just digesting, the actual approach that you're delivering the message with. Number 2, character introduction. If you're introducing a character, do it here. This is going to be more important. So we always do that when we create our videos. The first thing we like to do is introduce the character quickly. So the main characters are often introduced in the second scene, and they appear throughout the script. This helps make the story approachable and relatable for the audience. For example, this is Tom, or meet Tom. So that's usually how we'll start the second scene. Then go into a little more detail. Tom is doing a research project on the Civil War for his American history class. So by using storytelling, you create a situation that the viewer can identify with. Then the problem description. So again, going back to the dramatic arc. So you guys might be saying, hey, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the topic broadly. We often get the case where someone wants us to make a video and kind of give like this very long disclaimer in the beginning, or let them know generally something more ambiguous about the message. The problem is we've done a lot of research, and you start to lose the audience at that point. So what you really want to do is introduce your characters as fast as possible and introduce the problem. So that's where number 3 comes in. So the problem description, the plot point. Next, as soon as possible, the problem. So you set up the problem, and then boom, it leaves you right at the plot point. So next, as soon as possible, specify the problem. For example, Tom decides to visit the school library to complete his research, but he isn't sure how to search for the book he needs. In this way, you can get to the viewer's turning point quickly and help the viewers follow you. So you really want to establish the problem as soon as possible in the character. That's really important. As you can tell from this graph, it looks like about a third of the way into the entire story that you set up the problem and the character. We like to do it almost even faster than that, because people can recognize what the problem is. They can recognize, okay, I relate to this character really quickly. But what you're going to really need to convince them is in the solution, in the argument, right? So that's where we're going to go to now. So the turning point, the plot point, is the climax of the plot. This is where you need to introduce the solution to the problem. For example, luckily, the librarian, Miss Smith, knows exactly what to do. She mentions the Dewey Decimal Classification System and offers Tom a crash course on how it works so he can find the book he needs. The turning point creates a bit of excitement, which is why it should happen within the first few seconds, the first few scenes, which for us is 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So number 5, main argument. Here we have it as number 4. I was looking at, right?
Yeah. So just in case you're a little bit confused, so number 2 and number 3 are sort of put together in the chart for spacing purposes.
Perfect. Yeah.
So yeah.
And also for explanation purposes, you should do that kind of together early on. We'll usually say, this is Tom. Tom can't figure out how to classify his books or whatnot, and he needs something for his history class. Boom, we say that right away, and we already established the character and the problem really fast. So it is good to do those a little bit sooner.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we got the main argument. So the main point is the actual description, where there is an explanation of the concept. To stick to our example, thanks to Miss Smith offering her help, Tom can learn how to locate the books he needs in the library. And then we have some more additional arguments after that. At this point, a few additional arguments, other features, or additional information can be thrown in. For example, not only will he be comfortable searching for multiple volumes, he will be able to locate them and quickly access them. And then we get into the results. So that's the recap. You can either sum up the story again without making the video too long, or write a short happy ending. At the end, this is an example, at the end of the Dewey Decimal Crash Course, Tom is relieved. Now he precisely understands how to find the research he needs to complete his paper. We always tend to say a word because especially when we're making shorter explanatory videos, for example, we do like to say clear words like relieved or thrilled when it comes to the character at the end, because we want to really, effectively communicate how the character feels. So we do like to have there at least one word with an emotional connection to the character. So we do tend to say, Tom is relieved, Tom is thrilled, Tom is excited, depending on what the message that you're trying to convey. It's always good to say that kind of clearly. You can have the character look relieved or excited also, and that always helps. But saying it is really important because you want to communicate that the problem is solved and that the main character's life and future is now improved because of it. So here we have towards the end, you want the call to action. At this point, you can actually talk directly to the audience, so you don't need to be in storytelling mode anymore. No more third person is needed. You can talk directly to the audience, so you can say, um, you know, once they understand the concept, they will want to know a bit more information about it. You can say, for example, for more information on the Dewey classification system, stop by Miss Smith's desk in the library. So that gives you, a place for the audience to go. And we do that pretty much in any video that we create. Sometimes it's, hey, come by, my room if you have more questions, my office, or you can say, for more information, visit our website. So that's something that we do a lot. So we have people visit the website. Okay, and then rule number 4, use images. This is really important to us, and it's one of the reasons why we've been so successful. So apart from really mastering explanation from a written standpoint and writing our scripts, we also talk about explanation in terms of using images. So use pictures for simplicity's sake. Storytelling plus supporting the story with simple visuals helps guarantee a memorable message. You don't have to be any kind of artist to create a powerful image. Just use basic forms that anyone can recognize. It is often the most basic of images which can create triggers of a thought or memory in the learner's mind. A magnifying glass for search, a light bulb for an idea, a heart for love. Symbolic and simple visuals successfully trigger something in the viewer's mind. So let's take a look at this, for example. No one will really wonder, there we go. So no one will really wonder what the numbers on the bottom mean because the phone icon on top, even though it's an older phone and not a modern phone, they'll get the concept that that's a phone number. That goes to show that some symbols can be so strong that they cross generational borders. Like the save icon on Microsoft programs. It's a floppy disk, but kids today still know what it is. They still know that, hey, that means saving the document even though they've never seen a floppy disk. So let's look at rule number 5. Building confidence, inspiring trust. It's important that you leave your audience feeling inspired, interested, motivated, and confident in their own understanding of the subject in question. So they should have trust in themselves to continue learning about it. The good news is that if you've managed to follow the first 4 rules of simple explanation, then the final rule will take care of itself. If you have successfully shifted your perspective from being your own perspective to your audience's perspective, if you've simplified your message and not repeat yourself and repeated your message because you really wanted to hone that point in, if you told a story and didn't just lecture an audience, if you had a character and if you used an arc, the dramatic arc, and if you used images, which are just processed thousands of times more quickly than words, the learner will feel comfortable with following the explanation, and chances are you've done a pretty good job in building confidence. So those are the 5 rules of explanation. As you can see in the rule number 5, just happens if you follow rules number 1 through 4 properly, but you can always, rule number 5 ultimately is, go back and make sure you've done rules 1 through 4 correctly, and that you leave the audience with a good taste in their mouth, and that you haven't, bored them. So yeah. Hopefully we're keeping you guys engaged too. So I think now we're gonna go to have Mario explain some of the tips and tricks for the explainer video creation. So using our tool. So
I'll pass over the question and answer. So. Yeah, I mean, really the hard part is just, really doing those 5 steps. Once you've done through the 5 steps of a simple explanation, really the MYSIMPLESHOW is really a powerful formative tool for actually putting that into practice. So a couple of tips and tricks, how to create an efficient and effective explanation. We're just going to discuss MYSIMPLESHOW and the different phases within the tool. They're very intuitive. So the 4 simple steps in creating a video in MYSIMPLESHOW. The first one is your draft. You're going to go and look at the different templates, whether they're educational, professional, or personal categories. You could even upload a PowerPoint or have your text extracted automatically from a document. It's very simple. The second step is to actually write and go through and make sure that the text boxes are broken up exactly how you want them to and fine tune the language a little bit. Maybe you just pulled it off of PowerPoint and you want to tweak it a little bit. You can definitely do that here. Or you could write a brand new script, or you could upload from your PowerPoint script. And ultimately, the text you're writing will become the voiceover for your video. The third step is visualize. And our explainer engine really does a great job of automatically suggesting things which it thinks will make good visuals based on keywords inside of your script. So the language does matter. Sometimes you know those words that are a little bit longer or important will automatically get picked up, and a visual will be created for that. It's really very effective. We have thousands of original Simple Show illustrations to visualize your story, and you also have the option of uploading your own images, so it's even better. And the last step and the fourth step really is called finalize, and it's exactly how it sounds. In the free version, here's where you go to figure out the voice for your text-to-speech tool and render the video when you have it finalized. You can otherwise choose the templates, and really these templates they have three categories, and you find one that really works best for you. There's personal, business, and educational. So depending on how you want to approach a Simple Show, it has different templates of how you should be constructing and what you should be saying at which points.
Sorry, Mario, I just want to share my
please.
screen here so you can see the actual templates. Give me 1 second.
You hit share.
1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, should be coming up right now. Share.
Excellent.
Okay, so we can see the screen, right? Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
So basically, there are three template categories, as we said. And based on our word counts, the templates allow for max video time ranging between 2 and 3.5 minutes. And really, this is the ideal spot where you want to have a video be that long. Anything longer than 4 minutes. I know that when I'm on Facebook and I'm scrolling and I see a video that interests me, and I check the time and it says 5 minutes and 19 seconds, I go past.
Yeah.
Who's got time for that? The longest template is communicate your corporate guidelines, which clocks in at 27-25 characters. It's pretty long. I think it's close. It brushes on the edge of 4 minutes, which is really the maximum you want to make a video go. The information icon that's on the upper right-hand side of the templates will give you some inspiration there.
Let me just go into one of the videos so you can see the actual information.
We'll showcase that right now.
Let's do ALA, script. Okay, so let's go to educational. So that's right there.
Mm-hmm. And so it tells you a little bit about the template, using this template to summarize a single historical event, e.g. the moon landing, the fall of the Berlin Wall, et cetera, et cetera. This webinar would be a great historical event. Yeah, and you can always use the blank templates if you don't see the exact storyline template you're going for. I mean, really, or if you see a different one you think might work for you, it's kind of close enough. Obviously there are 1,000 different subjects that we could write something about, and if you don't see something exactly fits, you can get something that's close enough and just adjust it. We also have a volunteer template, which we're going to explain a little bit later in detail at the end of the presentation. Once you choose a template, we always provide guidelines on how to structure your script, as well as examples for inspiration. So, we'll call it hand-holding, but really it's just a suggestion of making sure that you have the proper tools and right guidance, and then the rest of it's in your hands, and you're able to take care of everything. You see here that there's, scene 1, start your video with a title. What historical event is your clip about? You just click there, it closes out that tab, and you just start writing. It's very, very simple. And it has an example there on the side. We explained the first moon landing. Something very short, very powerful like that, and then you get right into your video. Let's take a closer look at some of the educational templates so you know everything we have to offer. We're looking at the explain the moon landing one.
Okay. These are all tutorials that come up in front of every step, so
Yeah.
you know exactly what to do.
Mm-hmm. So we have introduce a biological process, introduce physics, physical law. There's a blank template, and summarize literature or a movie. I've actually used this one several times to explain movies that I'm very interested in. You discuss the pros and cons of a thesis, explain a law, introduce a chemical substance, mathematical formula. That one, is there for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's so much you can do with it. So yeah, so we'll go ahead and choose explain a historical event. I think that one's fine. Now that we've chosen our template, I think it's time to go into our write step and kind of dive into it. Um, Once you're in this phase, you'll see the writing guidelines and the examples as we talked about before. The only thing I'll say is be mindful of the word count limits. You can't add additional text boxes. That is a limitation you have, but we've suggested these limitations because they are, this is the sweet spot. If you really want to put 600 characters into your introduction, that's probably not a wise use of, that doesn't follow the rules we explained. Keep your introduction short. So we enforce these limits because of our explanation expertise, as we've mentioned. We've learned that people pay attention to videos if they're shorter, around 2 minutes or less. To create a great video in a short amount of time, be sure to only include the most important information to bring your key message across. That's the key word there is key. Obviously, all information is important, but it's a matter of separating what's really important versus what can be cut out. Other than that, just refer back to the 5 simple rules of explanation, and you can go ahead and start writing a great script. Apply the storytelling where it's appropriate, use the dramatic arc while writing, reference back everything we've gone over in the webinar so far, establish an emotional connection with the character, avoid repetitive word choices and unnecessary information, keep your language simple, short sentences, vary your sentence structure and rhythms in much the way that we would instruct our students in how they would write their essays. Just ensure that they're switching things up. They're trying to establish that emotional connection. Really, it's essentially you're writing an essay, but instead of writing an essay, you're creating a cool video in 2.5 minutes. Use literary devices like metaphors and personification to enhance your script. Use transition words and phrases to guarantee a great flow. Be mindful of your tenses. This is actually sometimes one that I find myself writing emails in. I'm finding myself in this, and then when I'm like, no, I'm talking about myself. Gotta make sure I pay attention to my tenses.
So common.
Yeah, and then most importantly, information overload is something to look out for. That is a hard no-go. If you are just placing lots and lots of key facts to your viewer, but these key facts, while important, have nothing to do with the video. Here we're talking about the moon landing, and suddenly we're talking about Neil Armstrong's backstory of when he was a kid and what got him into being an astronaut. That may be important, but ultimately has nothing to do with the moon landing exactly if what we're discussing is the moon landing. So only communicate your key messages. That's the big takeaway.
Okay, let me just go quickly back to the presentation. Okay. Jennifer, how do I get back to the presentation? Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, so a few visualization secrets. I think that's the best thing to just keep in mind. Creating an effective introduction and closing screen is simple. They shouldn't be too cluttered and should only include maybe 2 images if you're going to introduce a topic. So maybe for that, we explained the moon landing. Maybe you'll have the moon landing written out in text and then an astronaut come in beneath, and that's enough to get people to understand exactly what you're going to be talking about. Think of the introduction scene as a title slide for a PowerPoint presentation. You don't want to already be overloading your audience. For your closing screen, we'd like to include the call to action, as we talked about. What should the viewer be doing next? They need to look up more information on the video topic. Tell them that the website they need to go to, or tell them what time you're available to speak with them. In this case of the moon landing, you can say, for more information, here's, look up the NASA website at www.nasa.gov, and then they can go there and look at more information. Creating drama within the video is possible during visuals, and using the visuals themselves is the best way to do so. For dramatic effect, I like to use solitary images. Just if you need to impress something very strongly, a single image in the middle of a scene can have a great effect.
Let me just give a quick example of that, Mario. So
Yeah, absolutely.
this is going from the writing step to the visualize step, and actually right here when you click choose visuals is where all the magic happens basically. It uses our AI backed tool, explainer engine. That's a tutorial. And to identify keywords and create images. So here is where you can sort of, I just added one scene so you can just see what can happen. This is how you can create sort of dramatic effects like Mario was saying, just have maybe one image on a scene. We can change this image for Dewey Decimal. It doesn't look too much like decimal. The tool is funny sometimes. As you keep using it, it keeps learning. So right now it does recognize the name Dewey as a person. So instead of the decimal system, which is correct in a way. So let's see, Dewey Decimal System, let's look for document.
And there we go.
There we go. That's more representative of Dewey Decimal System.
And of course, you can always just play around with the tool, put whatever keyword there. You saw Emily using the search function, and there's 1,000 different ways you can approach this, and they're all correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the single image, we explain the Dewey Decimal System, and then maybe you have an illustration of actual Mr. Dewey Decimal himself, who comes in the middle of the screen and just his face, and that's enough to show. All right, okay, that's what we're talking about today. For example, another example, the sentence, Mark wants to explain the water cycle to his classmates, but he wonders how to do this effectively. You want to lay out the visualization in the first screen, use a male character, water droplets, group of students in a classroom, something like that. You take the second half of the sentence and create a new screen for it using the cut tool, which you saw Emily do already. And the only image on the screen should be a question mark. Drama achieved. Depending on your account type, since we have a freemium model, we have image effects, which we can showcase also. I'll just be very, very brief here. When you select an illustration, you look right over and you can see that there's, select an illustration. You can see that there's a little wand tool right there. You just click on it. And the basic illustration effects you can have are check mark, the X, or the twinkle, to just add a little message to the image you're choosing. So for example, X over plants means no more plants. If you want to do an X over a book, it might mean no more books or no more documentation, no more information. So if later on you were saying that certain libraries no longer use the Dewey Decimal System, you could bring in the same icon, apply the X to it, and when it comes in, the document will come in and an X will pop up over it to show no longer in use with the other visuals you have currently in play. Yeah, a couple things to keep in mind during the visualize phase. This is probably where you're going to spend your, really, I think sometimes your most time, where you're just making sure that once you've got your written explanation, I think everybody in UC has a pretty good handle on that. You go to the visualization, you're going to spend a lot of time here. So a few things to keep in mind, some tips and tricks. Images are processed 60,000 times faster than text alone. So use symbols and images that stay in mind. You can also use them in conjunction with text, but nothing beats a visual with a text instead of just text on screen. If I have to watch a video, but if I have to read the video, it becomes a little bit more complicated. You might begin to lose your audience. We provide 12,000 SimpleShow style images for you to choose from. We have a character option where you can choose characters in various phases, neutral, happy, sad, and then you can also do a portrait.
1 second. Jennifer, can you please enable the PowerPoint again? Thank you. Go ahead.
You can also add text on screen using the text option, as you saw Emily do. We have different font styles as well. You can upload your own images or images you have rights to using the upload image feature. This is a great opportunity to teach your students about plagiarism and why they shouldn't just be grabbing that image off nasa.gov and placing it into a MYSIMPLESHOW. While creating your image, you can all the images you've used will be saved in your used images feature, so you don't just have to search for them again. That's actually very useful. If you have one particular thing you like using, you just go back, click on recent used image, select your image, and boom, there it is. You can also edit your text directly in the visualize step using the text edit button. So in case you change your mind about how a sentence should read, you can just go ahead and change how it reads right there in visualize. You don't have to go back to the writing step. Going back to the edit it and the write step will actually remove the visuals you've chosen for your project so far. So be very careful and warn your students about that. There actually a pop-up will show you that actually relaying this information. Warning, you're about to lose all your visuals. Are you sure you want to do this? And if you hit OK, then it really will take you back. So if you don't want to lose the progress you've done so far, just edit your text in the visualize phase. Cutting your scene is also possible if you need to add more visuals. You want to create that dramatic effect, which we already talked about. Click the scissor icon and just drag it over to the text of what you want to cut, like you would actual scissors. Just literally cut around what you want to remove, and it's removed and creates a new scene. Visuals should align with your keyword. So if you have something like Tom wants to know about the moon landing, then maybe a picture of an apple orchard is not the best way to visualize that. If you're talking about Tom and he wants to learn about something, then maybe bring in an illustration of Tom, or maybe of a book alongside Tom to show Tom wants to learn something. Storyboard canvas should focus on the main message of the scene. So even though you might want to visualize Tom and wants and to and learn, sometimes just the keywords really is the best way to go about it. Images should be the same for similar keywords. So if you bring in one person with a beard for Tom, later in the scene you shouldn't use a different person for Tom. You should bring in the same person. And that's very easy through the recently used illustrations in MYSIMPLESHOW. You can vary visual structure in each scene. So if you only have 3 illustrations, you can shape them kind of like a pyramid. If you have 4 of them, maybe you want to stagger them like one of those sideways squares. I always forget what they're called in school. Or you could just align them like an actual square. So changing the way the illustrations are aligned on the screen itself is a great way of keeping your simpleshow fresh and interesting. Size, combine, and time images accordingly. Upload your own images or images you have rights to. Add text on screen, and think in symbols. Be creative, and most importantly, I cannot stress this enough, have fun with MYSIMPLESHOW. That is ultimately what it's there for, is to be educational in a fun way. I think that's all the tips and tricks I have from my extended use of MYSIMPLESHOw. I mean, there's so much I could go on and on, but once again, avoiding information overload.
Yeah, fluidity is always a key term that we use here, which is you want to have not too much space between the bold words where you have the voiceover talking a lot and not a lot of images moving on the screen. So you want to have a good distance. Obviously, the most important thing is that you pick the correct keyword, right? So you want to visualize really a keyword and not just something that's not helping explain the message. But you also, at the same time, is a good little tip, is you also want to have a good fluidity, which means an image appearing and then maybe a few seconds goes by and another image appearing. So you want to kind of combine both approaches, which is one is to really pick the keywords, and then the other one is to have enough movement on the screen. Usually if there's not a keyword in between a lot of 2 keywords, then maybe you can delete some of that text. So that's always a good point. So if you notice that there's a lot of words that you're using there and none of them are a keyword, then maybe you can reduce that text, and maybe you don't need all those words because none of them are a key word. So that's something that we always kind of recommend. So it's a balance between picking the right keywords and having a good fluidity.
Yep, I agree.
It's something we've discussed before as being movements in an orchestra. As you have something coming in for one word and then something. If you take too long before there's another movement, you kind of begin to lose that. So it's all about pacing and making sure it stays interesting, and then of course visualizing correctly.
And that gets easier the more MYSIMPLESHOWs that you create. You start to get a feel for the rhythm and which ones are easier. But if you have that in mind before you create your first one, it's only going to make your first one better.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of this is once you get on the tool and start using it, if you haven't used it yet, these are all things that you can certainly keep in mind, and it will certainly help you out. But do we have any questions from anyone? Is there anything in the chat at all?
Yeah, I think Twitter's a great example. Susie was saying here, I've learned a lot about deleting unnecessary words on Twitter. It's just, it's honestly, there's a lot of things to not like about Twitter, but there's a lot to like about it, which is it teaches people how to really use, a small amount of words. And that couldn't be more important in nowadays world. Twitter, is obviously being used to communicate with the masses more and more. And why is it being used? Well, because it's effective in that you can say short kind of messages that people can pay attention to. So
now there's double the characters though, so things are changing.
It's true. They have gotten more characters on Twitter. It's true.
But actually, I read that just a small side note, that people are actually interested. A lot of Twitter users are very much interested in these longer tweets, and they're like retweeting them and interacting with them more than the shorter tweets. So I don't know if it's good or bad. I guess it's situational.
Yeah, I mean, I think with explanation, videos and what we do, at least, we're not doing commercials here, so we're not doing 15-second videos. We're doing more, for us, an ideal video length is, a minute to 3 minutes, right? So we're in that range in terms of, because we're trying to explain something. So we're not just trying to get your emotions. We really are convinced that, hey, we have your attention, you're interested in this topic, and so, we want you to understand it better, right? So you're coming at it like, oh, I'm invested in this topic, but I want to understand it better. So it's different. So I think, Twitter might be expanding into the explanation realm and wanting to get build up a little bit more on people really understanding a little bit deeper than just getting sold an idea.
Okay, so I see we have a question from Susie about the basic paid category being called fun. It's basically just called that because it has sort of some fun features that are allotted in the subscription type. Like I said, we have a freemium model, and I'll actually talk a little bit about that after any questions that we have. That's just the name it was decided upon. It's sort of just a standard version that's not the free version, and it was decided to be called fun.
Yeah, and also because you shouldn't probably use it in a professional environment or something. If you want it to be a little bit more professional, more gimmicks, more kind of branded, then maybe you don't. But for if you're just communicating between colleagues, friends,
or
meetings,
personal,
more
like events, invites, like it's the fun way to use it. Are there any other questions? Okay, so if there are, just go ahead and write them in the chat. But I do have just 2 more slides. Well, this is my contact information. If you do need to contact me regarding anything MySimpleshow, feel free to do so. I will also, Jennifer has also my contact information, so you'll always find a way to reach me. It's just emily.cleary@simpleshow.com. Okay, so as you can see, MySimpleshow is really perfect for anyone in education or in any related industries, and we do offer the free version and then paid subscriptions with more features. So we have multiple options for any type of user. You'll see the 20% off discount code on the screen. It's good for any paid model, so that's from fun up until education or enterprise. And it's active from today until 1 month from now, so December 12th until January 12th. And the code is MyASL20! Keep in mind that the 20% discount is good for the first billing period. So if you choose monthly, because we have monthly and annual subscription types, if you choose monthly, it's good for the first month. And if you choose yearly, it's good for the first year. And I just wanted to mention a very short bit on that volunteer template that we have. So we do have a nonprofit organization actually called the SimpleShow Foundation. And we have a great opportunity for enrichment, volunteering, and even service hours for students if there's a requirement, or if it's just something that students want to do. So actually, in partnership with the United Nations System Staff College, the foundation has created a volunteer initiative in order to help explain the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 related goals for creating a more sustainable world. And this is actually done through creating videos with MySimpleshow that help promote and share free global knowledge, And you can learn more about it on the website on the screen. So it's just simpleshow-foundation.org. You can check out the whole website, and then the volunteer initiative is on the volunteer page. So that's about all for us, as long as there's no other questions. Thank you, Jennifer, for putting my contact info in there. Guys, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, one of the beautiful things about MySimpleshow is that, you can't send someone a PowerPoint presentation through an email and them understand what your PowerPoint presentation is. But when you send, a MySimpleshow, it's almost like you're there explaining your presentation, and then you can send it, and you don't need to be there. So that there's so many uses, but really with MySimpleshow, you can convey your message, and you can send it in an email. You can send it to however many people you want to share it with, And today, in today's digital age, that couldn't be more important. So just putting that out there.